Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another Finance Friday. My name is Brooke, and on my channel, I like to talk about personal finances and do lifestyle vlogs. So if you like that kind of content, please make sure to subscribe. I would love to have you over here. Every Friday, I talk about a finance topic, and today we are going to talk about the difference between cash flow management and budgeting, and talk about the pros and cons of each and how you know when you should move from which system. So, just a little bit of context on me. I'm 29 years old. I am married and I have been budgeting for the past 7 years. And budgeting has helped me pay cash for our wedding. It has helped me buy a home and to get on the compound interest train really early on in life. So, for me, budgeting is everything. I've been thinking recently if I need to move to cash flow management. Cash flow management is just automating all of your main goals, saving, investing, paying off your bills, credit card bills, debt, that kind of stuff, and then living off the rest, but not being specific about what categories those fit in. Depending on where you are in your personal finance journey, each one is going to serve a different purpose and help you in different ways. So let's first talk about the pros and cons of budgeting. If you are new to personal finance, this is where I believe you should start because budgeting gives you a baseline to know where all your numbers stand. And if you have never done a budget before, what I recommend is looking at the last 3 months of your spending, take those numbers and get an average of what you spend on a monthly basis so that you have a realistic budget. Budgeting is really good if you have a lower income and you're really strict on what you need to accomplish. If you have high fixed bills, if you have debt that you're paying off, budgeting is going to be what helps you dig yourself out of that hole because it's going to allow you to see how much money you're actually putting in your categories, being realistic about that, and then working to make sure that you are always pushing towards whatever financial goal you're working towards, whether that be paying off credit card debt, whether that be saving for a big purchase in the future, like a car or a house down payment, those kinds of things. Budgeting is going to be your best friend in that because it will give you control over the different facets of your life. However, there are some cons with budgeting, and some of the cons are creating an overly strict budget, which is why when you're budgeting, you should budget to have some miscellaneous spending, some guilt-free spending. Even if you're working towards paying off debt, you need to make sure that you have cushion in your budget to allow you to have fun and to go out to eat sometimes and to, buy that thing every now and then because having a budget that is too strict is going to make you fall back into bad habits where you're just going to be overspending. So don't do that. Another con of budgeting and having different categories is being overly strict about where your money can be used. So, for example, I, in the past couple of years, have really tightened my budget and the number of categories that I have so that I'm not as accurate with my reporting on breakdown of categories, but it gives me a better flexibility and a better mindset around it. When I was first budgeting, I had a very specific line item for dining. And each month I would go over that dining. And I'm like, well, I have money in clothes and I have money in like fun purchases, but I don't have any money in dining. And for me, that was like, why don't I have enough money to eat out? Because that's like something that I enjoy. I enjoy spending money on quality food. I enjoy money on going out to eat with friends and things like that. So for me, having that line item made me feel guilty at the end of the day because I was like, oh, I am overspending in this category every month. And it just made me feel so bad. So what I did instead, I lumped together my guilt-free spending, dining, shopping, going to events and things like that. I lumped it all into a single line item of guilt-free spending. And so then, if I spend more in dining, that's fine as long as I'm still hitting that overall guilt-free spending number because, there are going to be things that I like to spend money on that you don't like to spend money on and vice versa. So having that one category made it easier for me to not feel restricted when it came to doing the stuff that I really enjoy in life, which is going and having a nice meal. Now, with cash flow management, there are a couple of pros and cons as well with cash flow management. So, some of the pros of cash flow management is that because everything is automated, you don't have to think about it. Now, with budgeting, you can automate things to a certain degree, especially if you have fixed bills that you're paying all the time. Make sure you definitely automate as much as you can. So, one of my recommendations to make sure that your cash flow management automation really works for you is breaking out your paycheck into different accounts so that you have an account where you're sending your fixed bills money to, you have an account where you're sending your fund money to, and you have an account where you're sending your savings to, and you're automatically deducting that from your paycheck each time it comes in. A lot of workplaces will allow you to send your paycheck to different accounts. So you can automate sending your money to your investing account each month. You can automate sending your money to a specific checking account for bills and for fun and sending money to savings. And having that allows you to know that if you go into your fun checking account, all of that money is going to be for whatever you want, for buying coffee, for all that stuff. And you don't have to feel guilty about using any of that money for any of that fun stuff because you already have all of your money set aside in your bills account and your savings, and all of it is going automatically to everything that you need to cover in your life. Another pro of cash flow management is not having restrictions on what you can spend your money on after you've set aside for your savings and investing. And this is really good for people who have been disciplined in budgeting for quite a while and they feel comfortable and they know that, they're spending about the same amount each month. They're not, going into the red in their checking account, that kind of stuff. If they feel comfortable with that, then maybe cash flow management could be a good way for them to really start to loosen the reins on making sure that everything is dialed in and really start living their life and having fun. Now, one of the cons to cash flow management is that you're not going to get the data that you would with budgeting. So you're not going to know exactly how much you're spending on different categories unless you track that in a spreadsheet and you put those in different categories. But that kind of defeats the purpose of cash flow management. So if you're a spreadsheet nerd like me and you like to have your pretty spreadsheets and your tables and all that kind of stuff, it might not be best for you because you're not going to get that data. You can get that data, but then I would consider that to just be basically budgeting again. So there's not a real point in doing that. Another con could be that if bills change, if they go up in price, which they usually will over time, if you need to change your savings things, you have to go in and make sure that you monitor that. So it's not 100% set it and forget it as people would say online. For example, our mortgage payment went up because we had a shortage in escrow. So they reevaluated how much we should be putting into our escrow account each month. And that meant that our automated payment from our checking account to our mortgage lender went up each month. If you're using cash flow management just to not worry about your bills and stuff like that, you're going to have to make sure that you look into that stuff because you don't want to accidentally overdraft in your bills account because you didn't realize that your bills were way higher than they used to be and you hadn't changed how much money you were setting aside in that. Another con to cash flow management would be if you have variable income. So with variable income, if you're commission based, if you're doing work that you're not getting a consistent amount on your paycheck, maybe you're an hourly employee, that kind of stuff, that could really come to bite you in the butt if you're not careful with that because everything is automated. So when it comes to having variable income, I would recommend more being strict with budgeting there because you really need to know about how much money you're working on a month by month basis. Cash flow management is really good if you have a very consistent income and you know exactly what your numbers are each month and you know that they're not going to change or fluctuate on a normal basis. So for me, I think that I am still going to try budgeting for the next year and maybe eventually I will move to cash flow management. But for now, I really love to have my pretty spreadsheets like I talked about. And two, I worry that if I start doing cash flow management, I'll start to inflate my lifestyle in a way that I don't want to. When I ran the numbers of what I could do in terms of cash flow management, setting aside money to reach all my financial goals and how much money I would have left over, I would have about $2,000 left over. So for me, I know that's a silly worry. I know that that's something that probably in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. And maybe I can work through trying to figure out how a cash flow management system would work for me. But for me, I just like to be really dialed in on my numbers, and I like to just make sure that I know where my money is going and that I'm not spending my money all willy-nilly on superfluous purchases. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you ever thought about doing cash flow management? Do you have a budget? I would love to know all that stuff down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, please make sure to like and subscribe. And I will see you all in another video. Bye, y'all.